So welcome everybody. How are you today, Brian? Besides, the internet, your
Uh,
hotspot giving you trouble.
well, hopefully that's done now, but otherwise, I'm doing great actually. Everything's good. What are we? We're Thursday. We're always live on Thursday. It feels very. We're getting to the end of the week. Things are both heating up and winding down at the same time. It's good.
I know. Um, so let's talk about something else that is heating up, but definitely not winding down. It is the LinkedIn platform. As you and I both know, this platform is just taken off in the last few years. It's a huge part of what we do here at Lauren Perna Comms. But what we've realized over the last year or so is that it's not a huge part of what everybody does for their business. I think everybody, or at least 1 billion people, are on LinkedIn in some capacity, but we meet a lot of people across all industries that aren't on LinkedIn as a tool for their business or their personal brand. And one of the questions we get a lot is like, I don't really know what to post. A lot of those people, those small business owners, are already on platforms like Instagram or Facebook. And our thing is always you already have the content. It's just repurposing it for your LinkedIn audience. So that's why today we thought we would talk about that repurposing. Here at LPC, we talk a lot about repurposing to save yourself time and resources. But this is a very specific niche of repurposing that we wanted to dive into because it's really near and dear to a lot of small business owners, personal brands, hearts, because using content that you already have from one platform is great. But what about when it's a very different platform? So that's what we're going to dive into today. Brian, any thoughts as we get started?
Yeah, I think that you're right. It's a good indication that Instagram and LinkedIn in some ways is about as different as you can get. Maybe TikTok to LinkedIn being the other one.
Yeah, true.
But in both cases, right, you're going from a much more casual, less professional, less work focused visual platform to something that is much more generally buttoned up, professional, and text heavy. And how do you kind of manage that crossover while still not alienating either audience?
Exactly. And it's, I think we even said this in the description, like it's not a simple copy and paste, but at the same time, you don't need to create a whole new post for every platform. And I think once upon a time, with even advice that we've given, the advice was that you need to create something completely different for each platform. If you kind of joined the social media revolution for your business or your personal brand, about 5 years ago, that was the advice. Like your posts need to be so different for each platform. It has to be completely different. And now looking back, I'm like, no, that was crazy advice. We don't need to go that far. But we also don't want to clearly have just posted one thing on our Hootsuite or HubSpot and clicked off all the different platforms to cross post to. So it's very clearly meant for Instagram. And you guys know what I'm talking about when someone has Instagram specific tagging on their LinkedIn post or something along those lines. You never want to go to that level of repurposing. That's just kind of lazy. But there are things we can do. So let's talk about kind of the if and when the content is okay to repurpose. So thinking about your different platforms, when is it okay to repurpose? What do you think, Brian? Off the cuff, what's your kind of, response to that?
Yeah, well, I think it's always it's always good to find multiple uses of your content when you can. I mean, when you have a piece of thought leadership in some form, I think leveraging it for different platforms is really more about how you're repackaging that raw material. It's not so much about like finding new raw material. And I think that's
Yes.
exactly what we're kind of getting at here. It's like if you and I think I would add that the more raw material you have, the more you're able to then go ahead and reformulate it. So if you have something that's a little bit longer form, let's say a post, an article, a longer form video, it's easier to kind of take that raw material and reshape it, repackage it into a bunch of short videos or a bunch of short posts or something like that, or into an image carousel. Whereas if you're just starting for something really short already, like you made a great 30-minute Instagram video reel or something like that, there may not be much opportunity for repackaging that. So you may not really have much repurposing to do.
30
So
second. You said 30-minute, but God, I hope you can repurpose
30
in 30
seconds.
minutes.
Yo, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a lot of
Um,
material in 30 minutes, 30
yeah,
seconds.
yeah, there's a lot of material there. Yeah, yeah. And I think one thing to think about before you even take that raw material is think about the audience.
Yeah.
Who is on Instagram that you're targeting? Who is on LinkedIn that you're targeting? There is undoubtedly an overlap because we are both on LinkedIn and Instagram, and we are both consumers of brands. Um, and you are too. So just, think about it that way. Really dive down and see, who of my audience is on LinkedIn? Are they consuming my content on LinkedIn? Um, and if so, how can I repackage my Instagram content to be more LinkedIn friendly? Or is it a different audience? And what I mean by that, so perfect example in the life science world on LinkedIn, our audience is a lot of professionals, providers, clinicians, researchers. But on an Instagram or a Facebook, it's patients, caregivers. It may also be clinicians, because if you've ever dove down into the depths of Instagram, you will find communities for very specific niche divisions. Professions. So, yes, there may be providers on Instagram that we can target, but is that our main audience there? Are we repurposing the LinkedIn content for providers directly as is on our Instagram? So, it's really thinking about who is your audience on that platform, and maybe you do have two very different audiences. That doesn't mean that the content can't be repurposed. That's where it's important to kind of switch up the text or the visual. Because if you're talking about a disease state on LinkedIn, you can still talk about it on Instagram to that patient audience. You just need to create it more patient friendly language. You need to make sure that the image is more patient friendly. Or it's thinking about certain topics are going to only be for my LinkedIn audience, and that's okay. And certain topics are going to be only for my Instagram audience, and that's okay too. But it's kind of knowing if and when the content is repurposable across both platforms. So that's kind of the first thing to think about before doing anything is, who is my audience? What are they doing? Where are they consuming? And then, like you said, Brian, really remembering that not everything can be repackaged. And the thought leadership is the thought leadership. It's, your content is your content. You don't need to completely rewrite it for the crossover.
Yeah, Lauren, I love that. And thanks for kind of grounding it, taking us back to what should always be first and most prominent in our minds when creating any content, which is your audience. That said, it raises a question that I was hoping you could answer on this, which is okay, to the extent that we have audience overlap, let's say between Instagram and LinkedIn, should we be worried about oversaturation if we repurpose our content? Are we worried that the same person is going to maybe see the same basic idea in different packages and it's going to be too much, it's going to turn them off and annoy them?
This is a question like people ask all the time, and here's the truth, guys. Only like 2% of people see your content. I wish it was higher. It is not. So I think that, or last time I did my research, it was around that. Some posts do way better than that. Some posts get like 0 views, and it's the sad truth of social media and being a visible person on the internet. So I would never worry about that. And the other thing too to remember is that the more you are using that same messaging, the more you are driving home that's what you do and that's who you are. It is not like you are repurposing the same 4 sentences over and over and over again. That's a faux pas. But if you're worried about someone seeing the same general message on both platforms, you're actually doing it right, because you want people to know, oh, that's what Brian does. If you are doing too many different things, people aren't going to know what you do, and then you're gonna lose them. So I actually think that's kind of the biggest reason we're here, is so you can solidify your brand across platforms. And just because you have multiple audiences doesn't mean you're saying something different. It just means how you're saying it is slightly different. And in the most simple terms, like this is how I always explain it. Like on Instagram, maybe you would use more emojis. On LinkedIn, I would err on the side of, less emojis, a little bit more substance, you know, stuff like that. I think those are very simple tweaks. But that's the importance of like treating each platform for what it's worth, really diving into what is LinkedIn asking for these days. It is asking for thought leadership content, it's asking for videos, it's asking for depth. What is Instagram asking for these days? Instagram is asking for the beautiful visuals, as always. It's also asking for videos, but very different type of videos. So can you repurpose that content from your Instagram reel directly on LinkedIn? Some people may be able to. And if, it's worth a shot, I think, and really just tracking those analytics and seeing how it's doing. If it does not track well, then it means taking that same content from the Instagram reel and just packaging it into a little bit more straight on, like selfie style video or text.
Yeah, Lauren, that's a great point. And I really want us to dig into that a little bit further in the specifics, because let's say you have a great Instagram post, video post, and that, like you said, LinkedIn is going more video forward than ever before. They seem to be really leaning into that algorithmically. I can say that word. How how might you take something that, let's say, a script that you wrote for Instagram, and tweak that script to be something you can actually shoot for LinkedIn if you can actually repurpose the original video?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, one of the perfect examples is on Instagram, the day in the life videos are really popular. However, I haven't really seen those take off in the same vein on LinkedIn. But what I am seeing take off is people writing kind of like a little script of their day. And it's like, here's how my day began. And that's, I happened to see somebody in PR do it recently. So, and then, kind of, she said, what's it like being a freelance PR person? Here's how my day began. So it was obviously the exact same script of something that could be used on Instagram. I don't follow that person on Instagram, so I don't want to say for sure she had it on Instagram, but she very well could have put it on Instagram, but with the visuals in the background. For someone like me, adding those visuals to a day in the life, that sounds very stressful. So I probably wouldn't want to do that. But for a more video savvy person, just making sure you have the general script of your day ahead of time, and then then recording or whatnot. And then for LinkedIn, you're really just taking that script and turning it into a post. And that's the order that I would do it in. For some people, they may just record and do a voiceover, and then translate that into a script for LinkedIn. But that's kind of one example that I wanted to bring up, because I think that is a perfect way to show how the two platforms can be similar but different. And so the next question you might ask is, well, why would somebody on LinkedIn care what the day in the life of a professional is? But I think it's important because LinkedIn is going into a more personal viewpoint. They are really focusing on people and personalizing corporate content. So I think having that kind of day in the life content every now and then, it really just personalizes the people behind the business. And maybe your day in the life looks slightly different on LinkedIn. Like, on Instagram, I see people getting their coffee and, like at Starbucks or something. Maybe you don't need to throw that part into your LinkedIn. I don't know. It's completely up to you and how people know you. But, I think that is just one more way we are personalizing our content. So that's kind of one example that I'm thinking of off the blush. Anything from you?
Yeah, that's a great example. I love it. And I think that's exactly kind of what I was hoping you would get at. I do want to shift us a little bit because writing is still our bread and butter here at Lauren Perda Communications. Let's talk a little bit more about the actual copywriting difference between Instagram and LinkedIn, and how you might take something that is a little bit more LinkedIn friendly and tweak that copy for LinkedIn. What would that shift look like to you?
Yeah. So if I am taking content that is really kind of a direct content switch, a direct cross post from LinkedIn to Instagram, not thinking about, oh, this is for, one audience on LinkedIn and I'm updating it for Instagram. Let's say we are talking to the exact same audience. How would I update? For me, I'm always going to do LinkedIn first. That's, my jam. So for how I would update the text on Instagram, I would make it a little bit more casual. I'd probably throw in a few more emojis. We're not a big emoji type of company, but we do use it occasionally, if it feels right, and just kind of break up the text a little bit. I would also make sure that my text wasn't long, because I think on Instagram it's a little harder to read those really lengthy texts. So I'd probably shorten it a little bit. And I would also make sure that I'm just focusing on the heavy hitter points. And what I mean by that is because we are writers at heart, and I try to embrace brevity, but it is not my strength. I would give more kind of background and knowledge and like little kind of connector sentences, if you will. On LinkedIn, I would probably not, cut those out on LinkedIn unless I was really, droning on. But on Instagram, I probably would. I would probably not need to give you some of my little cheeky background, parentheses, statements that I sometimes do. I'd really just kind of get into the nitty gritty. And as far as like the visuals go, maybe I would use the same visual or just kind of update it a little bit to be more stylistic for Instagram. For example, we do a lot of carousels here on LinkedIn. Maybe I would have Melissa turn it into more of a MP4. or a GIF or something like that on Instagram. So hopefully that's helpful. This is a good way to use ChatGPT or AI. If I was gonna, give the seal of approval on one thing for ChatGPT, it would be something like this. This is a beautiful way to throw your post into ChatGPT and say, hey, can you turn this into an Instagram post using my language? So you don't hear me say that too often, but I think this is actually a great way. And what I like about using ChatGPT for that type of thing is it really dives into the different tones and kind of specifics of each platform, probably even more so than I would. And, I've tested it out, and it's probably not how I would do it for me or my clients, but for somebody that is just, trying to figure out which platforms to go on, or doesn't have the resources to hire a team, putting your stuff into ChatGPT to make it repurposeful, I think is a wonderful use of the tool.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's right. And I agree with you about that as a great use of ChatGPT that, is not letting it write articles for you that don't sound human, but instead taking something that you've already worked on and helping you tweak it to a point that it's useful in new ways. I know we're coming close to the end of our time here, but I did want to ask you about the blog post that we recently updated on this very topic. Check that out at
Yeah.
cornerpreneur.com, y'all. Um,
Yeah.
but
Uh,
there, you mentioned in that article also when you're transferring or repurposing from one platform to another to be very careful about your hashtags and your mentions. Can you say a little bit about that?
yeah, and I think I talked very briefly at the beginning, but there's nothing bigger of a faux pas on the social media world, you guys, than not updating your mentions or your hashtags. Um, Obviously, you guys, I'm being facetious here. There is literally nothing that tragic. It's just social media. So always remember that. People love when I say stuff like that. So I always want to throw that in. Like, if you've been listening to this and you're feeling like so overwhelmed, like one step at a time, you're doing enough. Reach out to us. We can chat with you and help. But remember that if you are doing a direct copy and paste, which we've told you is a little bit of a faux pas, but say you are, say you're just doing a copy and paste and switching up on the platform, make sure that you are doing the platform specific tagging, because the tagging will not translate to the other platform. It will just look like an ampersand and someone's name, and someone's going to know that you did not take the time to tweak it. And the hashtags also don't fully transfer. Sometimes it will even say hashtag, then have the hashtag. Hashtags are, an ever evolving tool here on social media. Some days I hear they're great. Some days I hear they're dead. It's really kind of, again, up to you to decide, is the hashtag tool something? When I say tool, I mean, embedded within the text. Is the hashtag something that you are finding helpful? Is it, when you use it, is it raising your analytics or not? Either way, whatever you decide to do with hashtags, make sure that the hashtags that you're using are relevant on the platform, and make sense for the platform. So those are the kind of must-haves when you are repurposing your content. But and you know what? One thing I know we wrote here on the I'm looking at the description that I wrote, and before we kind of hang up for the day, I do want to address cross-posting. And I had kind of meant cross-posting from each platform, but one thing I do want to share and kind of address is that I bet people are going to leave this and be like, all right, well, do I do it with my personal Instagram, my personal
Mm,
my personal LinkedIn? Can I cross post from my business to my personal?
yeah.
And that's something we really hadn't dove too much into the content on our blog, because we're really just focusing on the brass tacks of repurposing. But what I want to say about that is you probably have your Instagram um, page ready to go. You probably have that as a business, but it's still clearly from you. And so I'm guessing that the question is usually about LinkedIn. Do I post this on my personal LinkedIn or my business LinkedIn? This is what I always say. Um, you're going to have more followers on your personal page. That it's just, it is what it is. So if you are listening to this and you are, founder, solopreneur, I would absolutely just start with your personal page. And you can always cross post, like share, repost from your business page as you are building the business page up. You could do it the other way around if you have like kind of a similar amount of followers between your personal and your business page. Um, but I would say that it's totally okay to start with all this content on your personal page because you're just going to have that more personal, um, the higher level of followers on your personal page for most of us. If you're listening to this and you're a corporate company and you're trying to figure out, do I have my executives post this? Do I have my company post this? I think it really depends on what the content is. But if it's more kind of niche thought leadership, more opinion based, I think that's where you can ask folks to use their kind of personal platforms, their personal Instagram and their personal LinkedIn. But I don't really see any issue with a corporate company kind of using both their Instagram and their LinkedIn, their corporate pages to kind of that back and forth repurposing. I did just want to address that because I know people are always super confused.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It's a really good, important point. And also, we did a whole video on how to handle your personal versus your business brands. So definitely check that out when
Yeah.
you have a chance.
Yeah,
Uh,
we'll make sure we link the blog and that video. Um, Anything else, Brian, while we are cranking along? Oh, you may have lost him a little bit, but I think we are good. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments. We will be sure to answer. We will make sure we add that video and the blog in the comments so you guys can tap into that. Thanks for bearing with us as we navigated the beautiful world of technology. And we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, Lauren.
Bye.